Liezi's real name is Li Yuku. He is one of the representative figures of Taoism. Historical records about him are scarce. Only his era of life is known, which was between Laozi and Zhuangzi. He left behind 8 works titled Liezi. The content of the Liezi book is strange and mysterious, covering many fables and myths, like the well-known stories of the foolish old man removes the mountains, Kwafu chases the sun, and the man from Qi worries about the sky, among others. Furthermore, the book's thoughts on the universe and life are deeply enlightening. The first chapter, Tianrui, is the essence of the entire book. Through it, we can get a general understanding of Liezi's thoughts. Now, let's delve into the Tianrui chapter, following Liezi's perspective, to re-examine this world and our lives. One day over 2,000 years ago, due to the impact of famine, Liezi planned to leave the state of Zheng, where he had lived for 40 years, to move to the state of Wei. Before this, he had always lived in seclusion in the countryside, devoted to cultivating the Tao. Apart from a few disciples who followed him, no one knew him. Upon departure, his disciples were reluctant to part, hoping Liezi would leave them with some teachings. So, Liezi began to talk about the origins of the universe. He said, "All things are constantly being born, always changing, but the underlying essence behind them was not born and will never change. Although you may not perceive this essence, its influence is everywhere, in the formation of shapes, the production of sounds, the presentation of colors, the perception of taste, and so on. All are effects of this essence. However, this influence is not intentional, but natural." Clearly, what Liezi referred to as the underlying essence is the Tao that Laozi talked about. In ancient Western thought, the world was created by God, and this God has a subjective will. But then the question arises, where did God come from? In contrast, ancient Chinese thinkers over 2,000 years ago considered the Tao, which doesn't have a subjective will, as the origin of everything in the world. This is undoubtedly more profound, because the Tao is a metaphysical concept. It's not something we can perceive. We cannot understand it using the logic of our material world. That's why Laozi said, the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. Next, Liezi elaborated on the 4 stages of the birth of everything in heaven and earth, namely, Taiyi, ultimate ease; Taichu, the very beginning; Taishi, the initial stage; Taisu, prime substance; invisible, inaudible, intangible. It's called Yi, ease. Tai means reaching the extreme. So the Taiyi stage is the pinnacle of emptiness, a realm of chaos, without shape or boundaries. After Taiyi, primordial Qi, Yuanqi, began to emerge. This Yuanqi is the most primitive existence that constitutes our world. The stage of emerging Yuanqi is called Taichu. By the Taishi stage, the Yuanqi began to take on a certain form, and by the Taisu stage, Yuanqi not only has form, but also exhibits specific properties. The initial material world was born. At this point, Yuanqi, form, and properties coexist, integrated as one, indivisible. Much like humans, we have bodies, within which Yuanqi exists, along with corresponding properties. These 3 cannot be separated. Modern scientists believe the universe originated from a big bang of a singularity, with this singularity possessing infinite density, infinite temperature, and infinite curvature of space-time. At the outset of the Big Bang, only basic particles like electrons, photons, and neutrinos existed. Over time, they gradually formed atoms, atomic nuclei, and molecules, and then combined to form gases. Gases gradually condensed into nebulae. The nebulae further evolved into various stars and galaxies, ultimately forming the universe we see today. This aligns remarkably with Liezi's account. Liezi continued, "From Yi, 1 becomes. From 7 changes, it becomes 9. In essence, the Yi state of nothingness gives rise to the existence of Yuanqi, 1. Then this Yuanqi forms various materials, 7, and these materials eventually develop to their limits, 9. The one that undergoes 9 changes, ultimately, returns to become 1 again. That is to say, after things evolve to their limits, they return to their original state. In terms of heaven, earth, and man, Liezi says, the light and clear Yang Qi rises to become our sky, while the heavy and turbid Yin Qi descends, solidifying to form our earth. Our human life is formed by the mutual stimulation and combination of yin and yang. Liezi said, there are no omnipotent people or things. Everything has its own inherent position that it cannot surpass. Heaven cannot bear everything, and earth cannot produce wind and rain by itself. A virtuous and complete sage can enlighten the world, but there are things he cannot do. Every living being has its own realm of understanding. The principles of the world are either yin or yang. The teachings of the sage are nothing but kindness and righteousness. The nature of objects is either hard or soft. The things in the world are varied and ever-changing. All are just functions of the Tao. Everything is interconnected, and while there are myriad changes, they all adhere to their essence. Liezi went to the state of Wei. One day, while he was eating by the roadside, his disciples saw a human skeleton in the bushes that had been dead for hundreds of years. Seizing this opportunity, Liezi gave his disciples a lesson. He parted the bushes and pointed at the bones, saying, "Only he and I know that we have neither lived nor died. Is life truly joyous? Is death truly sorrowful? Within species, there are subtle factors of change. Liezi's words are mysterious. What does he mean?" He then provided many perplexing examples, such as frogs turning into quails, certain grasses turning into other plants or insects, leaves turning into butterflies, and butterflies turning into other insects. He also mentioned unrelated transitions, like a bamboo producing an insect that turns into a horse, and horses producing humans. How can these unrelated things transform into one another? But upon reflection, Liezi's point seems to be that everything is made of certain subtle substances. From this perspective, there's no essential difference. A frog eaten by a quail becomes a part of the quail. A rotting melon eaten by a fish becomes part of the fish. When humans die, they nourish plants. In this way, the idea of a horse giving birth to a human can be explained. This is also what Liezi later said: "All things emerge from nature and return to nature. Everything comes from nature and goes back to it. Life and death are just cycles. Therefore, why rejoice in life or lament death?" Subtle changes are hard to detect, but when significant changes arrive, people start to realize things in hindsight. We will continue Liezi in next video.